All right, folks, time for another edition of the radio show with Mark Lee. And of course, I'm Mark Lee, and we're going to have a fun and interesting conversation about a number of things. I know one thing that folks are definitely thinking about is the fact that we are definitely having some hot weather, not just here in North Carolina, but around the country. So, definitely that has been the theme as we've been in the middle of this heat wave and all along those lines. So, a lot of people have been paying attention to that, also paying attention to other things going on in the world, such as the politics of presidential races, and of course, thinking about things like what's going on there in the war in Ukraine as they continue to fight to stay free of Russia's invasion and all in that space. So a lot of people are paying attention to that, and of course, folks are enjoying the toward the end of the summer months if they've got the regular school year kind of set up, because I do know that folks are starting to think about of that going back to school kind of aspect, and even thinking what they might do in terms of getting clothing for their children that might be school age in that space. Because I do know that in August and September, folks definitely start thinking about that, as well as their last summer vacations and all in that space. And of course, people might be thinking about the movies, because there are some major movies that are out there, including Barbie and Oppenheimer and a number of other ones that are very popular and all along those lines. So a lot of people are rushing to check out these blockbuster movies, even though Hollywood is in the middle of that writer strike. And definitely it sounds like some of the other organizations are also backing them that are in the Hollywood structure and all in that kind of way. So definitely that is something that people are thinking about and paying attention to as far as what is happening from the cultural landscape. And of course, people are also paying attention to things in the sports world, such as the Women's World Cup and all along those lines, because I do know that one of the two host countries has been ousted. That's right. New Zealand is no longer in the hunt for the title. They have been ousted. And I think that that might have been a shock to their system, as they were one of the co-hosts along with Australia. So I think Australia is still in there. The U.S. is still in there. And a number of folks are in there as well. So I'm going to bring in my guests for today. Might have some others that'll join us later on. We'll see if they show up or don't, or along those lines, or maybe just be me and Susan, and it'll still be a fun conversation either way. Because I mentioned the whole notion of movies, and definitely there is a classic movie that is out there called Dirty Dancing. And like I said, I am from the Durham area, and there's another classic movie that definitely has some Durham roots and is almost as old as Dirty Dancing, even though I think it came out a little bit later, that being Bull Durham and all in that space. So definitely there were some great movies in the 80s and in the 90s and all in those kind of lanes. It's hard to believe that it's been 36 years since Dirty Dancing was out there, and I definitely remember some of those scenes and some of those powerful kind of narratives about that story. And it sounds like you are definitely a fan of that particular movie. So I was wondering, was that the only movie that you were a fan of that time, or were you just a big movie buff, or did just Dirty Dancing just appeal to you when you were coming up and were catching that movie at that particular point in your life? So definitely, I'm sure folks would be fascinated to know about your love of Dirty Dancing and how you've even had the pleasure of meeting the star of that movie, and I think his mom and some others as well. So definitely looking forward to hearing more about that as well. So I guess the first question I gotta ask you is it hot over there too? Because it has been hot over here in North Carolina for several weeks, several days. I think we might be in the lower 80s, higher 90s, so it might be a little bit milder, but it's still not where I want it. I like the 70s and those kind of like more fall and spring like temperatures. But I do know that they have said that I think this is the hottest month on record. And so that's a lot of records out there. And they have definitely said that this is one of the hottest of all times and all in that space, particularly in the month of July. So how are you doing? Where are you at? And how is the weather treating you?
Yes, I'm just outside of Detroit, Michigan, and it's been very hot here too, but I don't think quite as hot as where you are. We've had a lot of storms, rainstorms, knocks the power out, and blows the trees around, flood warnings, stuff like that. So it has been a much warmer summer than usual around here.
Yeah, I think that's been the case all over the place and everything. And I know that you are the writer for the official Patrick Swayze International Fan Club magazine. You've been doing that for about 7 years. And like I said, you had the pleasure of meeting him four times, and I've definitely gone to some different festivals. Used to go regularly to the National Black Theater Festival down in Winston-Salem and met people like Ruby Dee, Ossie Davis, Angela Bassett, Petrie from which is the bailiff from Judge Judy, and a number of others in that celebrity realm. And for the most part, I found them to be very down to earth. Now, you did have a couple of them that might have a little bit of an attitude, but that's just like society in general. And I don't think that that is the majority. I think most of them are very down to earth people, and as a lot of times they are actually wanting people to see them not just as stars, but as people in general, and they actually enjoy when you have a sit down conversation with them and all in that kind of way. Particularly if you're not doing that whole star gazing kind of thing, and like just kind of like only seeing them in that aspect of their life. But I was just wondering your take on that as one that is working in this realm, and you've definitely worked on some other entertainment and celebrity biographies as well. And I'm definitely curious to learn about who some of the others are that you have written about. But definitely, what is it about Dirty Dancing, and why is Dirty Dancing still popular 36 years later? I understand we might be doing a remake, and I definitely want to hear about this because some of
Oh,
these
for sure.
are really well, and some of them are, you know, you wonder why they did a remake. I can definitely see a Dirty Dancing remake, but what is it about Dirty Dancing that
Okay,
makes it popular?
well, yeah, I mean, I used to go to the movies like every weekend, okay, but nothing hit me or resonated with me as strong as Dirty Dancing. So I saw it probably the first weekend it came out, way back in 1987.
Mhm.
And I just had no idea I was going to have this kind of reaction. But I was going through a tough time, sort of, a bad breakup, a relationship. And the movie was like sort of, a shot of feel good. I just came out feeling better. And then it was like Patrick Swayze. Whoa, he just seems so talented, and of course very good looking as well. Um, so I was one of the ones who went back to the theater. I can remember even going in when it was already playing. I was late and I came in the middle, and they were like, "Are you sure you want to go in the middle?" And I'm like, "Sure." And anyways, Patrick did a Barbara Walters interview in 1988. I don't know if you saw it, but it was really great and made me think, you know what? He's not only like brilliantly talented, he's a good guy. He's got character, integrity. He broke down talking about his dad's death, how he wanted to honor his father by running a horse ranch and this, that, and the other. So, okay, I got hooked on Patrick Swayze right then and there. And I followed his career. I joined the fan club, his international official. That might sound a little hokey, but it was really fun. Um, and he did come to Detroit here. I'm only about a half hour from Detroit. And he hosted Complexions Contemporary Ballet, and they were having a benefit because they still do, um, inner inner city kids. They do workshops for them for dance. Now Patrick wasn't doing the workshops, but he was actually hosted two benefits in Detroit. So I did get to meet him, and it was like the first time I was probably starstruck. Okay, I have to admit I didn't like sleep well or eat well for like 2 days before meeting him. I never thought I would meet him because, like I said, I was following him in the media. I joined the club. Um, the club said, the president's out of Scotland. This is so unusual for Patrick, who's going to give autographs, after the dance concert and stuff like that, photos. So, first time I was a little starstruck, I have to admit. And this is the first time I ever, thought a celebrity or actor or whatever was so cool, such a good guy, and followed him like this, joined a fan club. It was a really good experience. Like you mentioned, I wrote articles for the fan club magazine, and really that started me off on writing. I mean, I'm a social worker. I should say a retired social worker after 45 years or so. So the first time I was writing stuff basically was for the fan club, and I got such good feedback. And of course, Patrick and his wife Lisa saw what I wrote. It was a quarterly magazine. So anyway, ended up meeting Patrick four times.
Wow.
twice in Detroit at complexion events, and once in Houston, 2003. He and his wife Lisa's film One Last Dance premiered there. You know, they're from Houston. He was born in Houston, grew up there before he went to New York to study dance, and then he, of course, he went to LA. But I found Patrick to be very down to earth, just very down to earth, very genuine, very caring. He was just unbelievable. He made sure um, at all the events I was at that all the fans got autographs, photos. I forgot to mention, like Nashville, that was a film festival also where they showed
Mhm.
One Last Dance. And I can remember being there with two other of the fans, and his security's going, okay, come on, we gotta go now, Patrick, or Buddy. He was known, his nickname was Buddy among his friends and family. We gotta go. He's like, no, I have to finish all these autographs first. So also in Nashville, because of the fan club status, me and the other two fans um, were sort of given the red carpet treatment. So after they screened the movie and they had a question and answer and stuff about the movie, they were having dinner at a jazz club in Nashville. And we were allowed, no one else but us three ladies, when they finished eating and stuff, to cross over to where they were. They had a pretty big group, like 20 people or so, and talk to Patrick and his wife. And at the end, like, see, his assistant was there, Cherie, at the time. She was like, come on now, give me your camera so we can all get group photos.
Mhm.
It was unbelievable. So we all got, in a group and had our photos taken. And then we're going to leave. And Patrick just came over and gave him this big bear hug.
Mm.
I'm like, wow, he didn't have to do that. You know what I mean? And he's like, thanks for coming and thanks for supporting our film. So he was just a genuine down to earth guy. And,
Yes.
unfortunately, with his battle with pancreatic cancer, I thought he was so courageous and handled that so well. That just made me respect him even more. I mean, I probably saw all of his movies. A lot of times he played a hero
Mhm.
in the movies, certainly in Dirty Dancing. Um, and what really happened for me was he became my hero off screen also. I found him to be very inspirational. I'm not the only one who felt that way. I had some other tough times going on. And, I looked to him for strength and inspiration. And like I said, I'm sure I'm not the only one. So it was
Right.
really, really quite a journey. His movie in Houston, getting back to that One Last Dance, the theme of the movie was don't give up on your dreams. It's never too late to realize your dreams. So when I was there in Houston way back in 2003, I'm like, I'm going to write a book. Enough of this, writing for the fan club's cool. I tried to write some articles, they never got published. So I'm going to write a book. That's it. This has inspired me. That was, of course, way long before I became ill. And I did. I wrote my first book, Dirty Dancing. Um, Unfortunately, right before it was going to be published, he passed away. He never saw it. But I know that I'm not the only one who has this big connection to Patrick and a big connection to Dirty Dancing.
Yeah.
I haven't,
No.
yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about that and everything. But like I said, the movie, I know, like I mentioned, Bull Durham, and there are other movies like that that still resonate with people years after they come out and everything and all in that space. So, what is it about the messaging of Dirty Dancing that you feel still connects with people in another generation? Because there are people that didn't get to see television interviews with Patrick Swayze or get to have that kind of connection to him that you've had. And definitely, I know I've definitely seen some interviews and read articles about him, but there's even young folks that are familiar with that particular movie, even though it's 36 years later and everything. So, what is it about that movie that you think really resonates with people in this particular day and time?
Well, first of all, it's a coming of age romance story. The
Mhm.
sort of geeky girl gets a hunky guy. and they develop a relationship eventually, Baby and Johnny. And it's not based on what they look like or what class they're from. It's based on what's inside. And, they come to support each other. They're both better off for being in the relationship. And the story is told through dance and music. And I think those two are a big factor. But the bottom line, I think, is optimistic because it's like anything is possible. The power of love is real. And the other thing, speaking of real, they based the movie on real stuff that had happened in the Catskills because I became friends with Jackie Horner, who unfortunately passed a couple of years ago. And she was a Catskills dance teacher for
Wow.
decades, and she was a story consultant to the movie. She told Eleanor Bergstein, the writer, various incidents that were true that really happened over in Grossinger's, which of course no longer exists anymore, one of the Catskills resorts. So I think people find it's real. And it's not, when it first came out, the people inside the movie and outside the movie, it's like burn the negatives, it's just fluff. But no, the audience is grabbed onto it. And I think everyone, because I actually did a survey for my first book on Dirty Dancing, online survey. Everyone has their own thing about Dirty Dancing, what they like the best. But I think, the end of the day, it's the power of love and things are possible. We can surpass class differences and philosophical differences and stuff like that.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I know that another thing that people loved about that movie is what you just mentioned, the dancing aspect of it, because it definitely had some fantastic dancing. There was some dancing that was maybe a little bit more suggestive than some people were willing to deal with in their movies at that particular time. Because I do remember there was some scene controversies around some of the dancing and some of the types of dancing that was going on. But I was just wondering, in your own life, how important has dancing been to you? Because I know that one of my mentors in terms of creativity and in terms of a life, and unfortunately he passed away as well, was Baba Chuck Davis, who was very
Mhm.
much into African dance and all in that space and traveled around the world spreading that message of positivity and hope using dance and all in that way. So that was one of his regular mantras that he used to have, was about being peaceful and using dance as a way to unify us as a society and a world society, all in that kind of way. But I just wondered how important was dance to you, and are you a dancer yourself, whether it is going into the clubs or whether it is going into different environments, either now or in your younger days, or you like me and you got two left feet and you're glad they invented the strobe
Yeah.
light. The strobe light definitely makes a
Uh
bad dancer look good and everything.
huh. Well, I think, like what you're saying, I think is dance is a universal language. And basically, my own personal experience, I took ballet when I was like 5 and 6 or something like that. I never was a big dancer, but I sure learned a lot, especially um, through doing a book. I did a book on Patrick's mom, Patsy Swayze, who's a very renowned choreographer, taught thousands of students, whether many were, went into the performing arts as professionals, and many didn't. She taught life lessons. But anyway, I learned a lot from doing that book. Um, dance provided Patrick discipline. I mean, his mom was his first teacher, by the way. Provide Dance provides people discipline, sort of a framework background for doing all kinds of stuff in your life, not just dance, whether it's going into performing arts or whatever career you choose and stuff like that. So um, I think it's just a universal language that is so positive, and I think in general that performing arts, they really matter. It's very important. And in this day and age, that was one of Patrick's messages too. Um, when he gave the speeches at the two events for Complexions Contemporary Ballet, he talked about You know, the kids are sitting in front of the computers, they're cutting back on the performing arts,
Right.
and that's not good. The performing arts, they it does bring people together, people of
Mhm.
all backgrounds, you know, in different countries all over the world. They're explaining to me, I interviewed a bunch of dancers for the book on Patsy, and they were explaining to me that, you know, the names of certain steps are the same all over the world,
Mhm.
you know, and how important dance was in their lives.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And everything dance is very important, just like you said, music is, and a number of other things that are in that lane. And unfortunately, I don't know that it's getting enough support in the school systems and all along those lines, which is kind of what you were referring to, and that Patrick also talked about when he was living, and definitely was an advocate for arts education and all in that space. Sounds like he was definitely very much an advocate for that, and that's definitely something that I support as well. I just wondered, was there anything about Dirty Dancing, or even the things you learned from Patrick those few times that you met him, that you were able to bring into your regular work? Because you did mention that you retired after a illustrious career, and my brother actually works in that field as well, with social work and all in that space. So I was just wondering if there's something from the movie, or just the movie narrative, that you were able to bring into your work in social work in there in the Michigan area, some sort of the messaging that you carried on in your day to day life as a person working in those emergency departments, and all along those lines.
Yeah, I was like social worker so many years in the ER there, and went through some traumas myself because of the job.
Yeah.
So I did draw on Dirty Dancing because, once again, it's a story of hope,
Mhm.
and people of different backgrounds can come together. And honestly, I used to watch it more in years past than what I do presently. It's a little sad for me to watch it now because Patrick's not here. But I do watch it still sometimes. And um, Patrick is, I know I keep talking about Patrick, but he's more than a dancer, musician, singer, actor. You know, he really, that's where I drew a lot of strength from him. And by the way, Dirty Dancing is not something you watch just when you're having bad times. You watch it when you're having good times too.
Yeah.
It can boost you up, and reinforce the good times. But I found Patrick to be just very inspirational. His mom was too, honestly. Her story is really not known that much,
Mhm.
but I think he got a lot of his stuff from his parents, how he was brought up. Um, you know, his mom was a dance teacher in Houston
Mhm.
for years, and she brought into her studio African American kids, and a lot of kids from backgrounds who had no money for dance classes. And she was probably the first one in the Houston area to do that. I was told over and over by different people she gave away lessons. And I don't mean to say just to African American kids. I mean to kids who, let's say, their parents are going through a divorce and there
Mhm.
was no money, came from lower economic backgrounds. So, you know, that was a feat in itself. And that's how Patrick was brought up. So I hope I answered your question.
No, you definitely did. Another thing that I know that used to historically happen, I'm thinking about like the Brat Pack and some of the others. I mean, we just recently lost Tony Bennett and all along those lines, but a lot of those were very much multi-talented, whether it was Sammy Davis, whether it was Frank Sinatra, whether it was Tony, whether it was a number of others, meaning that they were both dancers, actors, singers. They were definitely multi-dimensional in their creativity. And I think there are still some modern ones like Paula Abdul and some others that are still multi-talented. I would argue that Beyonce is multi-talented as well. But I just wonder, do you think that that is something that we see enough of, those performers that are able to, like Patrick, do the dancing and do the singing and do the acting and even some of the other skill sets that are out there, and are as multi-talented as some of those previous generations were? Or do you think that that is a lost art to be multidimensional.
It's almost a lost art. I mean, it's sort of kind of funny because Patrick hid for a long time his dancing and stuff. You know, he had a bad knee, and so he ended his professional dance career and he went into acting. And for a long time, he didn't bring up his dancing because he didn't want to be typecast. Well, you know, you're just a dancer, and he really wanted to learn the craft of acting. So, you know, in Dirty Dancing, he's he's dancing down except for the last scene. And so, and like imagine he and his wife had a dance movie. Excuse me, I'm sorry. It really didn't. It wasn't that popular, to be honest, um, among the general audiences, which was such a shame. There's such beautiful dance in it. He and his wife, and it was an inspirational story. Some people might have thought some of the dialogue was a little corny, but it was semi autobiographical. And I mean, Patrick was compared to Gene Kelly a lot, and they were supposed to work together, and then one thing led to another, and they never did. I don't think. I think I'm not sure if Gene Kelly was in North and South. I can't remember. Maybe you know. I'm not sure, but so yeah, I think it's a shame because um, there's so much to the arts, and I'm sure there's people out there who I mean, look at Gregory Hines.
Mm-hmm.
He was an example, right?
Yeah,
He was in movies. He was the tap dancer of the century, you know.
yeah,
His brother also, who's still living. Um, I don't know that he did movies though. I'm not sure, but people like that, it's rare. I think.
yeah. It is a rarity and everything. I know another rarity is this notion of having that support of your parents and everything. And it does sound like Patsy was definitely a hero and supportive of Patrick in his career and all along those lines. And you did have the pleasure of meeting her a couple of times as well. So, what was it about Patsy that resonated with you and that actually was something that you admired about her? Because you did say that you thought of her as a hero as well. And I know the
Yes,
importance of having parental support because I know that both of my parents, even in their 80s, are supporting me in some of the things that I do, and they definitely support my uh, definitely nephews who are my brother's kids, and I think that they are about to be 14 and 15 in this month that we're getting ready to go into in August and all in that space. But if they decide to go into acting or sports or some other career, I'm sure that their grandparents, my parents, will be supporting them just like some of the other family members will be, including myself as the doting uncle. So, what is your thoughts around the notion of Patsy as a hero and what kind of entertainment career did she have? Because I know you mentioned her dance school, but I didn't know if she ever did anything in Hollywood or
yes, she
Broadway.
did. Um, but getting back, I only really met her once,
Okay.
and it was at the same film festival in Houston because she's one of the four choreographers of the movie that they used, and they had a reception after the premiere of the movie. The
Mhm.
movie was showing in like four different theaters at the same time in Houston, and those people who came from actually all over the world from the fan club got to sit right in front of the family. But they had a reception at a hotel after the screening of the movie, and I would say there's around 1,000 people there. Patrick running around with no bodyguard, no security for most of the time. So I got to speak to him a little, but then I got to speak to his mom, just me and her. And she just struck me being very gracious, very warm, very welcoming. Thank you so much for coming to see the movie. And um, I said, oh, it must get tiresome, all these fans. Oh, no, no, no. You know, we like that. And honestly, this might sound a little nutty, but the very next day, the people from the club were on a bus. We were going to take a tour of Houston, spots where Patrick grew up, his schools, the dance school, his mom, and this and that. So who comes on the bus? Patsy.
Hmm.
And she goes, Patrick's going to come on the bus. You guys can ask him whatever you want. Just don't take any more pictures. His eyes are sort of really sensitive from all the photos last night from the premiere. So he comes on the bus, and they stayed on the bus for about an hour. I never heard of anything like that. And
Wow.
I just happened to be sitting in the third row. I asked my question, I got my answer. It was just cool to watch the two of them, you know. Um, his mom was known for having very, very high standards, you know, especially to Patrick and his siblings. But look where he, look what that did for him. And then his dad was very supportive too. He was an engineer, but he was also like a rodeo guy. That's where Patrick got all the rodeo stuff. But getting back to Patsy, she, you know, I said, I got to learn more about this woman. She just seems so amazing. But back then, 2003, there really wasn't a lot about her on the internet or anything. So I, that was my last book I did. That came out last year. And I ended up doing like around, I can't remember exactly, I think it was like 29 interviews. People who grew up in her studio, took dance in her, colleagues, some performing arts, stuff like that. So she really was amazing. She taught thousands of students, not just dance lessons, but life lessons. Then she did Urban Cowboy. Did you see that movie,
Yeah, I
John?
remember Urban Cowboy. She was in that.
She did that. She was a choreographer,
Okay.
and she taught John Travolta how to do the two step.
Wow.
And then she ended up moving to LA area to Simi Valley, and she did about three or four more movies. But she had a dance studio there. She worked at Debbie Reynolds Dance Studio, and she just, like I said, had thousands and thousands of students. Um, but her family was most important to her, above and beyond everything else. Patrick's father died suddenly of a heart attack right after they moved to LA. Um, but he was supportive of Patrick too. I mean, he was less, what would be the word? Well, he was a little bit more low key, I think, than mom. But mom really, uh, she just wanted the best for all of her kids. She had five children. So, so she left quite a legacy. Besides giving all those free lessons, opening her classes to kids of all backgrounds and races, ethnic groups, and stuff like that. She also, from what people told me, did free rehab for kids and adults because she got into dancing after she was in a car accident and for rehab. So she's paying it forward, you know. And um, Patrick was also, as I mentioned, an advocate for dance, but he also was into conservation, especially on the second branch in New Mexico.
Hmm.
And it's a shame he didn't get to do more with that. And then he became an advocate for cancer patients. You know, you'd have to go out, stand up to cancer. It was their first presentation. I don't know if you've ever seen it on TV.
Yeah.
They He gave a speech. He was ill, but he trying to think. I think it was at the sort of the beginning. It was sort of a surprise because they didn't know if he was going to be well enough to do it. He did it. He wrote something for the Washington Post. He wrote a big article, and it just so they were both, to me, they were both heroes because they did stuff to make the world a better place. I
Yeah.
mean,
And speaking of making the world a better place, we've got another guest. Definitely want to continue learning more about Patrick and everything, but I also want to bring on Santar and learn more about what they have got going on and all in that space. How are you doing today? And all along those lines, we were actually talking to Susan. She is a fan of Dirty Dancing and the movie that it was out there way back 36 years ago and was released back then. But she's had the pleasure of meeting Patrick Swayze as well as Patrick Swayze's mom and all in that space. And you don't look like you can even have been born around 36 years ago and all in
Yes.
that line. So definitely, I was just wondering if Dirty Dancing is a movie that you ever heard about, and if you'll share a little bit about your own stories and all in that space. And I had to tease you about the age and all in that kind of way.
Totally, yes. Hey guys, nice to meet
Hello.
you. My name is Sardor. Hey Susan. Hey Mark. Yeah, so actually, yeah, you're right. I was not born. I was not born 36 years ago. I think my parents weren't even married back then. So I am an entrepreneur. I'm a tech entrepreneur, and also an immigrant who moved here to the U.S. 9 years ago. Originally came here for school, for high school. I'm 25 years old, and I got into business. Well, at first, I had my first business when I was 10. It was back in middle school, and when I used to sell video games to my classmates. And so entrepreneurship has always been my passion, and that kind of got me into just wanting to be an entrepreneur in tech specifically. So I'm a tech entrepreneur currently. I'm the co-owner of this company. It's on my background, Jafton. Um, we're a tech company that does outsource software development for other companies, basically a service provider for any company that needs tech development, right? IT guys, basically, right? It can be anything from building a web software to a mobile application. Actually, our focus is in mobile. So any kind of apps they have on your phone, we can build that. And we built it for our clients. So that is my business. We have over 100 people that work for us in this business, and been having it, been in this business for 4 years now. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Well, one of the things that me and Susan were talking about, I'd love to hear your thoughts, is how important, because you mentioned being a tech person even at the young age of 10. And it sounds like Patrick Swayze had a lot of support from his mother, even at a young age and everything. So, what kind of support have you gotten from your parents? And did they like just really encourage you to go out and hustle those videotapes and those video games when you were a kid? Or were they going like, nah, you got to go get a quote unquote real job and not be a
Yeah.
entrepreneur? So what was their attitude when you told them that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, particularly in the tech field?
Yeah, so I was very lucky with my parents. They've been amazing in terms of supporting me in that. My dad has also been an entrepreneur. I've actually interviewed him a few days ago on how he got into entrepreneurship himself without realizing it, because he grew up in a communist country in Soviet Union where entrepreneurship was not even a word, right? And then when the independence hit, he became an entrepreneur day one without realizing it when he started selling things. So, but he got into entrepreneurship, and he realized that's his kind of motto, and that's who he is. And he got me always, like, he encouraged me to go into it. My mom was a little more kind of reserved toward that. She was like, maybe yes, maybe no, but she never like restricted me, except when I wanted to quit school and do it like full time, which I eventually ended up doing anyways. But I wanted to do that from middle school. I just wanted to quit school and just do business full time. But my mom kind of, held me back on that a little bit. So I only did that in my second year in college, which I don't regret now. But overall, my parents were very, very supportive of that. So very lucky with it. Yeah.
That seems to be the theme with a lot of these tech giants, because I know they won't say that the founder of Facebook started it when he was in college, if I remember the narrative correctly and everything. There were some other ones that literally didn't even go to college, even though I literally live around the corner from Duke and all of that. So I know that Melinda Gates went to Duke, but I don't even think Bill Gates completed college, from what I remember, the Microsoft founder
Right.
and all along those lines. And I'm not even sure, well, Elon Musk might have completed some of the universities that he went to and everything. But a number of these tech giants don't necessarily need to have a college background. And I even have some friends that are in the metaverse space, and some of them have not completed high school or college or some of those other levels. So, how important do you feel it is to have alternative forms of education? Because a lot of you tech folks, and I would argue probably even Patrick when he was living, were being very much independent of the traditional school system. And I know that one of our founders here on the network is very big on fiscal literacy, and he feels that we oftentimes don't teach folks, whether they're going into acting or law or a number of other things, enough about being fiscally responsible. So I was just wondering
Right.
both of your takes on that. So I'll start with you, and then definitely want to hear from Susan as well.
Sure. So you're saying like, what are the if I've gotten any alternative forms of education except
Right.
college, and like, is it even like, yeah, absolutely, yeah, of course. Like I say, I left college, but my education never stopped. Right, it doesn't stop till this day. I always take some courses on business, read books, attend live events, learn from others. Right, so that there's continuous education, and yeah, I'm actually very much pro alternative sources of education, not like the traditional one. Obviously, if you're trying to be a doctor or a lawyer, obviously you need to have that formal education. So I'm not saying nobody that needs that, but if you're trying to go into entrepreneurship or any other profession that you can kind of learn from other sources, it's more efficient. So for me, I've taken before quitting college. Actually, I've over the summer I've taken some professional courses at General Assembly, which is the school for tech, right? That gives you like 3 month courses where you can like hands-on learn from the practitioners, from people who are actually working at those jobs, right? So my instructor for product management was this guy who worked as a product manager at an actual tech company, right? So I've taken that and I've seen that actually this is a way more relevant kind of route for me to go into tech, and it's a faster route also. So absolutely, I've taken that course, and I'm currently even taking a course on government bidding, right, for businesses, how to get into government contracting, right. So there's continuous education beyond college.
Yep, no doubt about that. Susan, what's your take? Because I'm thinking that Patrick, even when he was living, might have been doing some alternative kinds of education and was constantly learning. Sounds like he was a constantly learning individual. So, what is your thoughts around? Are we doing enough to encourage our kids to learn outside of the traditional mode?
I'm not sure. I feel really old sometimes, especially listening to this conversation, but I think we probably could do some more encouraging. You're right about Patrick because he just loved learning stuff, whether it's jumping out of planes, surfing, and if you saw the movie Point Break, he played a couple military roles, learning stuff like that. For me personally, um, I'm officially retired, but I'm trying now to jump back and learn about the book business. Okay. So I'm taking classes online. Some are free, some are not. Um, how do you get an agent? And then, there's a lot of tech stuff that I'm better at now, but I still have a long way to go and I'd like to learn more. So it's time and room for learning.
Yeah, there's definitely always room for learning, and that's something we definitely have to encourage on a regular basis. I know that some folks are afraid of the technology side. I mean, I'm part of this pod TV, so I've definitely learned about live streaming and a number of other tech things. I sometimes tease my mom because she is one that is doesn't have a Facebook account, but she did learn a long time ago how to do spying using either my aunt's account or other accounts so that she can find out what we're up to, even though she's not necessarily engaged in social media as much as some of the younger sets are. And by younger sets, I can even say those of us that are in the 50, 60 age range and all in that space. But like I said, she finds ways to skirt around, whether that is using my late aunt's account or a aunt that is currently living's account to find out and read what we're doing without necessarily actively being engaged in it and all in that space. So definitely, Sardar and everything. What is your take when folks are somewhat intimidated by technology? You're in the technology lane, and I know that there's some folks. Susan isn't the only one that are sometimes intimidated by the technology lane, particularly as we are becoming more of a technological society. You're on mute, Sardar. You're on mute.
Oh, sorry, just realized how many. Yeah, so totally. I mean, this is this is, I think, always been a thing. Whenever there's innovation, whether that's like IT or just any kind of general technology. I mean, during like the the Renaissance, during the Industrial Revolution, people were always intimidated by new things, right? Because it always poses that potential existential threat to them or to people they know or to their habits, even if technology is always meant, in my opinion, and even factually, I think, like, to improve people's lives, right? And it does it by making it more efficient, but especially right now, I think with all the fear around AI, people are just very intimidated by potential threats of, like, technology replacing humans, and this one being a lot more existential than previous waves of technology, right? And not only are we, as usual, just experiencing change in technology, but we are seeing the rate at which the technology is changing being the fastest ever. Like, we're seeing more changes in the year than our ancestors used to see in their whole lifetime, right? So it is it can be overwhelming, but I would say generally the trend has always been that technology has created better lives. Technology has created more efficiency, and even if it's replacing certain jobs, it's creating more other jobs, right? There's literally a AI content curator job, right? Or there's like a prompt engineer. These are new professions that have popped up this year, right? So always got to stay optimistic. There's, I think, more than threat of replacing, there's still like huge shortage of labor in a lot of fields where we need more people, and AI is able to actually do that. So I think the intimidation is still there, but I would tackle it with just telling people to stay optimistic about it creating more efficiency instead of taking them down.
Well, along those same lines, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. And actually, Susan's got some around this as well. But there are a lot of people that are concerned, like you just said, around the nature of it taking their jobs. I think that that is part of the narrative around that Hollywood strike. 'Cause there are a number of people that are in Hollywood that are concerned that their acting jobs won't be there. They're concerned that there were a number of actors, from what I remember, in Dirty Dancing, and I know a lot of the actors are like, well, they won't need me anymore because all they do is got to get one image and put a little bit of a computer generated version, and then you don't need to have as many extras, and movies can be filled of tons of extras and all along those lines. So I know that that was
Yeah.
part of the concern, just like there are writers that are concerned that, hey, chat gpt can write my script and I don't necessarily
Yeah.
have to write it myself. So just what is your answer to those folks, and even the restaurant workers? Because I know a lot of folks are going that, why do I need to be here if the AI can service and do the waiting? And I'm even thinking that Susan's former profession, there might be AI that could go out there and interview people in social work, even though I personally think that there are fields like social work and teaching that are nuance based, meaning that they don't always understand the nuances the computers don't. But that's just my thoughts. And I do know that there's some people in the computer lanes that have said that that could be changing soon as well, that they might get more nuance than we are expecting. So now, what is your thoughts around that? Because that is a big fear that folks have, is that there are some very traditional jobs that could be gone, whether that's teachers, social workers, or definitely even those in the Hollywood and sports frame as well.
Yep, absolutely. Um, so with that, I think, like I mentioned just now, I think there's more shortage of labor right now than there is like a need for replacement, right? So I think the very first line will be just filling in the gaps when there's not enough workers, because especially at this current moment, I think the employment is at the lowest it's been in a very long time in the U.S., right? So obviously that is as subject to the economic changes, and certain times we'll still have more unemployment than we have now. But again, like, it is always it has always happened, and it will happen again, where if your basic kind of like labor is replaced, right, where there's physical job requirement, if it's replaced, then there'll be need for more jobs. If it's not physical, then it'll be more mental, like, or like, how do you call it, like knowledge workers, right? There'll be more need for knowledge workers, I think. And we do have to acknowledge, though, that this time around it's a little different. Yeah, where the rate of change is different, where the replacement might happen faster than we expect. Um, but for those folks, I think unfortunately, um, it's a survival of the fittest. You know, where it always comes down, where there's evolution, you have to a little bit like step up your game, I guess, right? As direct as it may sound, um, you got to learn new skills, and there's never been a better time to actually do that, right? So let's say you're a restaurant workers in hospitality, right? You're a server, and all of a sudden we have 10,000 robots that are going to be like servers at the restaurants, and there's no more jobs for servers, there's no more job for dishwashers. What are they going to do? Well, I'm sure they're smart people, and they can go and like open up the internet and learn new skills, because there's going to be, for every job that's taken, there's going to be another job that's created, right? If not more than one created for each one taken. So what you got to do is just step up your game and learn new skills, and it's more accessible than ever because there's internet and it's free. And the same AI that's taking your job can teach you a new job. Like ask GPT. I use GPT a lot for education, you know, and other forms of AI and tools on the internet for education, because you can learn so much over the weekend. You can even learn how to learn. You know,
Mhm.
there's more efficient ways to learn. I was just I've seen this course the other day where they teach you how to learn faster and more efficiently. See, not only can you learn a skill, you can learn how to master a skill better, right? There's so much knowledge out there right now that's more accessible than ever, where you don't have to be privileged to be able to learn it, to be able to have the mentorship of like the smartest people in the world. It's all in your smartphone right here, like, and everybody has it, right? So that's my response. I mean, as optimistic as we can stay about that not happening as fast, it will happen. We have to acknowledge it. We can't ignore it. You know, it will happen. And first ones, like you said, will be the not the knowledge workers, but will be the physical labor workers, and they have to step up the game and learn new skills.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, Susan, just switching the topic just slightly and everything. As I mentioned before, and actually on one of our other shows, which is our media show, which aired earlier today, like around 12 to 1, we were talking about book bans and this whole notion of banning books and all along those lines. And as I recall, and like I said, it was 36 years ago, so I don't remember all the details. What exactly was the controversy around Dirty Dancing? I mean, I know there was some suggestive dancing, but I do know that there was some controversy involved in that particular movie. So, what exactly was the controversy, and does it still play out that controversy in today's time? Because, like I said, I do vaguely remember that there was some sort of a pushback against the movie, and I don't remember exactly what the pushback was. And I'm just going to be perfectly honest; I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, yeah, like you said, the name of the movie, Dirty Dancing, well, that wasn't looked upon too well. Even the cast had some misgivings, because it could, you think it's like an X-rated movie or something. It's not. I mean, there's suggestive dancing, but the really big thing, where they had a sponsor lined up, and when they saw that there was an abortion in the movie, even though
Mhm.
it wasn't a botched abortion, um, no, we're not going to sponsor that. So that was really big back then to have that in a movie. I mean, nowadays it's commonplace, but it wasn't then. So a lot of the issues they dealt with, the class division and the abortion and stuff like that, is still relevant today.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things I was thinking, sort of going back to the conversation, was for the sequel. It's now been postponed over a year. It's going to come out the summer 2025 due to the strike in Hollywood, strikes, I should say. They're trying to, one of the biggest things they have to tackle for a sequel, what about Patrick? So,
Mhm.
there's talk about they have to get permission from his estate, from his wife. Like, are they going to have flashbacks? So their technology will come into play, because I have a feeling that, there's just a feeling, there's no evidence or anything I've read, that they're going to probably have some kind of flashbacks.
Yep, I could see that. I mean, they did that after Michael Jackson passed. There were a couple of flashback tours. So literally, it was tours where he was performing, even though he was nowhere around because he had passed. And there were a couple of other celebrities that have had those kind of tours as well. So that is something that we are seeing more of, where people are using holograms. And I know that's probably a outdated form, but they're using holograms and other things in order to create the image of the folks that were around, and I definitely have heard that even in the AI conversation, because a lot of people are saying that you don't have to worry about making it, but so far in life and whatever our lifespan is, because there are ways that our memory can be carried on. And I definitely have heard that conversation. But so, Dar, what's your thoughts around that? Because I've heard people literally saying that we can uh, live in to some degree in like that eternal life, but that they talk about in Christianity and other things. But it would be more our memory and our thoughts, and that some of those can be carried on into further in, even after this body has left this plane.
So you're saying like how would people live on like
Right.
after that, like basically a digital immortality? Is that what we're
Right.
talking about right now?
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. There's it's one of my favorite topics. I mean, there's always like a want, I think, from a lot of people to just kind of extend their lives as much as possible, right? Whether that's through immortality, which is one of the concepts in sci-fi movies, right, where you don't really die from like the health issues or the age, right? But you are still mortal if anything happens to you, right, physically. But in which case, yeah, I guess this digital immortality comes up. I mean, I'm a fan of this sci-fi show Black Mirror, which
Hmm.
you probably have
Familiar
watched.
with it?
Yeah, and there's I certainly don't like the dark side of it, how they show like the negatives of it. I wish there was a white mirror which showed the lighter version of the same concept, because I'm always like pro optimism, right? So I think it's a fantastic concept. With that all said, where our souls, so to say, quote unquote, can live on beyond our physical capacity of kind of you know perishing, right, and just be in the cloud, I guess, right. In which case, I guess it's hard to comprehend what kind of life we're going to live, right, and what kind of are we going to be like, just kind of eternal and just be stuck and have this existential crisis and just be like, and which is what they show in the Black Mirror, right, where the time is eternal and they just don't know where to go, and they just suffer from being stuck in the eternity. um,
Because one of
or
the
are we gonna
episodes that I'm familiar with is I call it the gamification episode, but it's one where you are literally playing games as you are exercising and you're doing a number of other things. And I want to say it's almost like an American Idol type competition that is going on as well. And I forget the title of that episode, but it is very much
Yeah, I
a
think it's the
gamification one.
1,000 merits or something
That
like that. It's called.
yes,
Yeah, that episode. Yeah, it's yeah. There's some pretty crazy episodes. And the one in the latest season, actually, the first episode, I think they show Salma Hayek being in a movie without her own consent. That she didn't know. I mean, there was consent, but she didn't know. She gave that consent when she signed up for Netflix, and now she's in the movie without her even getting any kind of royalties for playing in that movie, because she has never played, but it's a computer generated thing. So, um, yeah, I'm again. I try to always be optimistic. I guess because you can always get scared and just think about all the negatives, and which is kind of helpful to kind of, I guess, prevent what might happen. Uh, if you guys follow Yuval Noah Harari, the author of *Sapiens*, and he wrote a fantastic book about the future species and the possible future civilization that he called Homo Deus, basically the possible future evolution of humans into cyborgs, right? And what that might lead to. So he explores both the positive and negative outcomes in an attempt to not predict really and be negative, but also like to kind of warn us of possible ways we could go wrong with it, right? And educate people on staying alert, right? But with that all said, I think human species, it's not without risk that we may go into, I guess, the really bad state of future where the outcomes of AI may be negative. But I am hoping, and I do believe it'll be more positive, and it'll bring in more, uh, just more life into our
yeah.
lives, I guess.
No, that makes a lot of sense. But speaking of the negative aspects, I'm actually going to tie because I'm guessing on, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Susan. I'm guessing on the last name, and you definitely already, Sandar had mentioned your own heritage and everything. But one of the things that has been going on in society is a lot of people are concerned about the division in society. There's this notion of otherism and all in that kind of space. And there's even that concern when it comes to AI, that AI doesn't always understand the nuances of different people's cultures and all along those lines. So I was just wondering both of your thoughts around that, because I'm guessing that's what I meant when I said to that part of it to you, Susan, that your family is of at least of immigrant background. And I know a lot of times we paint people as a certain type of immigrant. There's the whole notion of the educated immigrant that is getting one sort of visa. I think it's the H-2-1 visa, and then those that are coming across the border. And we oftentimes paint them in a negative way and everything. I'm sure that even now you're probably getting some flack for your own background, Santar, because definitely there's that whole war in Russia and Ukraine, and there's some people are thinking that all Russians have to be evil, even though there are Russians that were fighting against what was going on in Russia before it happened. So, what is your thoughts around this division and this otherism that goes on? Because I think a lot of times we are looking for the boogeyman in the room, and we will pick on the boogeyman and find the new boogeyman in the space. We saw that even with the Asians after the pandemic came around, and a lot of people started attacking them because of the fear that the pandemic had come out of China. And I'm not saying it didn't, I'm not saying it did, but wherever it came out of, there was that kind of notion that they've got to be the bad guys in our personal narratives. So I was just wondering both of your thoughts around that, because otherism is something that I get very frustrated by sometimes. Either one of you.
Um, so if I'm understanding correctly, the question again is about altruism, right?
Otherism, like going and attacking other people because they're different. And a lot of times it comes up in the immigration discussions. Like you said, you just mentioned that you're a Russian immigrant, and a lot of times it comes up in the immigration discussion. So sometimes they will pick on a immigrant because they are coming from a Latin American society, which has certain negative stereotypes, or they're coming from a other place that has more positive stereotypes. So sometimes the otherism can work the other way, because sometimes people are more favorable to say the ones that are from India, because they are oftentimes coming from the elite class versus the
Yeah.
lower class of India.
Huh. Interesting. So, like, what I think about like that prejudice, I guess, right?
Right. Yes.
Toward. Okay. Well, I'd say I fortunately I have not been a target of any kind of prejudice that I've noticed. Maybe a few times only, like in the 9 years I've lived, which a little bit by my accent, a little bit by my looks, you can probably tell I'm not born and raised here, right? But I still haven't really sensed that in the US. There's maybe because I lived in big cities where there's so much diversity, and it's practically impossible to really be having that prejudice. And I've been educated well enough in the school that I went to against that, right? And everybody in my school was not ignorant to do that. Um, there's there's negative sides of it as well, but there's some like sometimes it does just make sense statistically, right? I mean, if you look, as you mentioned, like the Indian diaspora, right, in the US, an average Indian immigrant, I think, is way more successful than an average immigrant from, let's say, Russia or somewhere else, right? And I think it's fascinating because it just actually brings in a need for studying what they do differently in those diasporas. Each diaspora has its own strength and weakness, right? Like Malcolm Gladwell wrote in his book, I think it was The Outliers, how Italians actually had the longest life expectancy in the US out of all other nations, right? Italian immigrants. While the average Indians had a higher grades, or like average Asian students had a higher grades, right? So it's not to kind of discriminate against that, but it's interesting to know these stats so you can know who to associate yourself with and what to learn from each diaspora, right? Or from the Jewish diaspora. One thing we can learn is, from what I know, Jewish immigrants are very, very supportive of each other. If somebody from their diaspora just immigrated to the US, they're very, very supportive, and they will do everything to just kind of find them a job or help them out with their business and whatnot, and to really support, right? Well, I noticed in our diaspora, for example, in Uzbek diaspora, it's not as present, right? Um, so yeah, I think there's always something to learn from that, from the, I guess, the we don't call it a prejudice. This is more of a just kind of um, knowing the stats, right, for each kind of immigration group.
That makes sense. Susan, your guys' thoughts? Because I know that sometimes there are very insular groups, because that's actually what I've observed from some of the Indian communities. They are very insular and they oftentimes will hang out together and oftentimes will work together. There have been some other societies that used to be insular and then were seen as a threat. So sometimes those insular neighborhoods were destroyed, because that's kind of what happened with some of our Black Wall Streets here in North Carolina and around the country and all in that space and everything. But then there are lots that are very much supportive of each other, kind of what Santar was saying, everything. So they're very much supportive of each other. And then there are other ones where literally the money comes into your group and then it goes out. So it doesn't do a lot of circulating in the community, whatever the community is. And the community doesn't always have to be racial. It can be ethnic, it can be gender, it can be a number of other factors that people use to divide up their communities. It can even be church based and everything. But I don't think that all the communities are as supportive as they probably should be. But I definitely saw a lot of support during the pandemic. But I have this theory that we do really good with supporting each other during a disaster, but then after the disaster abates, we sometimes go back to our selfish ways. And that's just been a observation I've made in my 61 years of existence and all of that. But definitely, what is kind of your takes on this, Susan? And like I said, I just picked on the name that it had to be a ethnic name, but I'm not sure what the ethnicity is. So.
Yeah, three of my four grandparents came from Russia,
Oh wow.
Russian Jews. There's a really big concern right now in the Jewish community of the rise of anti-Semitism.
Mm-hmm.
It's very alarming. Um, people are trying to come together on that.
Right.
And overall, my opinion is this country is very polarized. It's sort of scary because it brings back um, almost memories of Nazi times or pre-Nazi times. Um, so we do live in a precarious world as far as I'm concerned. It's very right now. I think there's so much going on. I think it's so unpredictable. And of course, you have to have optimism, but you have to be realistic also. You know.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And anything coming back to the movie, like I said, we're talking about a variety of things, and that's what we do on this show, just like we do on a lot of the other shows. But what are some of the things, whether it's some of the things that we're talking about, or just like in general? Because you did mention the abortion issue that is featured in the movie, and a lot of people don't remember that, even though it was a botched one, like you said, and everything. And definitely, we just saw a whole issue around the world around that topic. But what are some of the other things outside of that that folks you feel folks may not know about the movie, or that they've forgotten about the movie, because the movie did come out 36 years ago? And will we see similar themes from what you were hearing in the new movie? Because I do know that there are some folks that will probably be going like, that movie was good, but not every remake is a good remake, because there have been some remakes that I've really admired. Some were they were even better than the originals, and then there were others that I'm going like, do we really need to see that version and everything? And that's just me being honest about remakes as movies and everything. But what is your take on some of the things that we should have learned, or that we might not know that were in the movie? And definitely, what is your thoughts around the remake? Will it be a basic retelling of the story, or are we going to take the story in a different direction?
Well, first of all, I think class division was a super big thing. I mean, obviously between Baby and Johnny,
Mm-hmm.
the wealthy girl, younger girl, and then the older, I don't know, if you want to call them lower class, middle class, whatever. Um, and Baby's coming of age, and she confronts her father, who's supposed to be a big liberal. Look at, your prejudice against this guy, because he doesn't have as much money, or he's not in the upper class like we are, you know. So that was a big theme. How the staff, were in certain quarters, and and Baby, the rich girl, invades that world. I don't know if you remember, like pretty near the opening. carries the watermelon in there with Billy. She's like, they're like, what are you doing in here? You're not supposed to be in here. So um, I think that was a really big thing besides abortion. And look what the issue of abortion is nowadays. I think we have to say too much more about that. But the sequel, Jennifer Grey is going to star in it. She's also a producer. And she has promised to treat the movie kindly and honor Patrick's memory. A lot of the fans are very upset. They don't want the movie. Supposedly it's set in the 1990s, and I think it's her granddaughter is the new baby. And they're going to use some of the old, the original soundtrack, but they're going to have some new stuff, including rap. So that should be like super interesting. They're going to have dance in it. Um, and supposedly, and from the director and one of the writers of the movie, Jonathan Levine, um, it's for the younger generation and to give them a chance at a story, and they're not going to ruin the original. So I'm sort of cynical because I'm a big fan, like many people. But I say, hey, give it a chance. There have been other attempts. They had a TV show that was just horrible, and it's sort of interesting because they're going to try to involve some of the other original actors and actresses. But let's face it, many of the other people have also passed on, not just Patrick, but Jack Weston. Who's the guy? Jerry Orbach. Um, the guy who was the band leader was Honey Coles. He was just phenomenal. So, I mean, there still are some people left, like Kelly Bishop. And I don't know the gal who played Baby's sister, she'd want to go in on it again or not. Your cousin Brucey, if you know who he is, he's a radio personality who was the guy in the movie who saw Jennifer Grey's box in half, supposedly. So it's really to remains to be seen how it's all gonna go over. Generally, I'm not a big fan of remakes or sequels.
Right.
They had a prequel, Havana, what was it called? Oh, set in Cuba. Havana something Dirty Dancing, and that. I mean, I thought it was okay. Patrick had a cameo role in it, but it wasn't nearly what the original Dirty Dancing was. So
Doesn't
I'm
sound.
a bit cynical, but I say, hey, they deserve a chance.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that and everything. Hey, Sardar, just coming back to the conversation around the youth and all along those lines, do you think that we're doing enough to support our young people when they want to create entrepreneurial jobs? Because I know one of the things that you mentioned is the fact that you were an entrepreneur at a very young age, selling those video games and all in that space. But do you think that we are doing a good enough job of encouraging folks to go into entrepreneurship? Because I sometimes think that our school system is training people to go to work for a corporation and to stay in those corporations and not necessarily to encourage entrepreneurship in that space. And I'm not saying that everybody is an entrepreneur because it does take a certain skill set to become an entrepreneur. But what is your thoughts around that? Is our school system doing a strong enough job of encouraging entrepreneurship
Yeah. So, are you saying in this country overall, or like
in this country and worldwide? But you can start
in
off with this
worldwide?
country.
Okay. Yeah, I think when I was growing up, I kind of witnessed that, and I see it even more now with the online media being so prevalent. Entrepreneurship has become cool, right? Where kids actually do dream of being entrepreneurs. Like I see my nephews, I see my younger brothers kind of wanting to be entrepreneurs. They look up because I think it used to be that for me when I was growing up, although I wanted to be an entrepreneur, I looked up at people like rappers and singers and people in showbiz, like actors, because they were famous, and there weren't that many famous entrepreneurs. Actually, I can't recall any. I haven't seen any public entrepreneur figures until I was in my teenage years, right? So before my teens, actually, I always wanted to be a rapper because that's what I looked up to, right? So I think media has a big role, a huge role in like encouraging kids to want to go to a certain profession. And now that entrepreneurs are actually doing the same things that those showbiz people are doing and are actually becoming the showbiz people themselves, there's a lot more encouragement to go into business and be entrepreneurs. Now, can everybody be an entrepreneur? Yes, but not a rock star entrepreneur, of course, right? It's more of a, I think there has to be some innate talent. But yeah, I think unconsciously, unintentionally, it has become so with the new state of media being online, being so distributed and decentralized. Entrepreneurs have a bigger voice, have a bigger presence. So with that, there's more encouragement toward going there. Now, are we doing enough to support that? I would say there could be more, right? Especially for younger kids to encourage them to learn more about business. I certainly know that both in the middle and high school, and even in college, most of colleges don't teach entrepreneurship because it's what they teach is what really pissed me off in college was when you go into business administration, what they teach you is literally administration. They don't teach you entrepreneurship. There's no entrepreneurship classes. Maybe there's only a few in some top universities where actual entrepreneurs teach you. But if you're like the 99%, where I went to like a simple college in New York and LA, they don't teach you entrepreneurship. They don't teach you how to open a business, how to actually start a business, what bootstrapping is, how to raise capital. Those things are taught online by actual entrepreneurs. So thank God it exists. The YouTube exists, or like the paid courses exist from entrepreneurs. But in traditional education, I don't think there's being done enough to um, raise entrepreneurs properly, right, and give them enough of the right education.
No, that makes a lot of sense. This is actually for both of you because definitely Susan had the pleasure of talking to both Patrick Swayze when he was living, as well as his mom at least once, and probably had talked to a number of other folks that might be considered in the celebrity lane. And I know that you've spoken at things that's you being Sardar at things like Podcast Movement, and there have been other people like that those events like Mark Cuban, Gary Vee, and Richard Branson. So when you have had those conversations with these folks that are the success models that we are seeing in society, what are some of the lessons that they have taught both of you in the sense of a gem that you got from your conversation, whether that's your conversation, Susan, with Patrick and Patrick's mom, as well as any of the others associates that they've had that are in that lane? And like I said, I don't know the different ones you talked to, but I'm sure you've talked to a number in the tech field and business field, Sardar. So what are some nuggets of wisdom that you have gotten from these conversations?
Yeah, I mean, to me, those people have kind of been a little more remote and like more of a one-off interactions, versus I've been fortunate enough to have more of a closer mentors that were entrepreneurs from like younger age, starting with my dad. Even, he's a real life entrepreneur who's always been my mentor from my young age. But even like the higher ups, like the celebrities, some of my clients actually are celebrity entrepreneurs, and I get to learn from them while giving them service. So a lot of lesson. I mean, I can't probably count them all here, but one of the things I learned from my client, who's a celebrity entrepreneur, is um, the fact that you have to be very fast in business. And a lot of the times, things that you think you can accomplish in 10 years, you can accomplish in 5 or 3, right? If you know the right ways. And that's why the role of mentors is so essential, because they help you avoid some of the mistakes they've done early on, and not go through the path of um, just making those mistakes yourself. For me, for example, how I got into this business was not a traditional way where I started from the ground up. So, like, 4 years ago when I was quitting college, I had two choices basically. I could have gone and started my own business from scratch and learned as a rookie from my mistakes, and gone a long path to get here. But I did it the other way around. A lot of people kind of get surprised. How are you, a 25-year-old, have a company with 100 employees and, like, and all that? Well, that's because I actually didn't start this company from ground up. I teamed up with my mentor who already had a company with 15 people, and we joined forces to grow the company together, right? So I had him as a mentor who had already a 15 years experience in the field, kind of helped me out, and I brought in my energy, my enthusiasm, my kind of naivete, even right into this, which kind of balanced with his being grounded more and experienced. So that's kind of what I learned, that you don't have to do those mistakes yourself. The best mistakes are the ones you learn from others instead of learning on your own experience.
Along those same lines, and I definitely want to hear from Susan as well. But along those same lines, I do know that one of the things that your bio talks about is that as a child, you were also bullied. And we actually have a show about bullying here on the network. It's called Where's the Love, that Stephanie Hockenhall and her son Gene do. And they have definitely been in that bullying space. So, how much is that played into your education as well? Because I sometimes think that learning from those negative experiences can help us in business and in our business growth. And let's be honest, there are also bullies that exist in the business world and some
Yeah.
negative people that exist in the bullying world as well. So if you've already dealt with it as a kid or as a person that has already gone through that experience, you might know how to handle them better than somebody that hasn't had that particular experience because you've already dealt with that bullying personality when you were coming up. So how much has that negativity helped you grow as a business person?
Yeah. Oh wow. You've done your homework for real, Mark. Yeah. Interesting. So with that, it's yeah, definitely been through a lot as a kid. It's been a very stressful experience, and that's why I don't actually have that many positive memories of school, or you know, um, not until like late high school when I actually found my community and it was a little easier. Most of my school, yeah, it's been hard, and I've been like kind of the outcast and not in the circle, and I've always gotten this like, "Hey, you can't sit with us" kind of attitude from other kids. But I think, yeah, it has. If that hasn't happened, if that adversity hasn't happened, this foundation, which I really do call it as a foundation to my success, wouldn't be there, because I would still be ambitious. I would still be doing things. Don't get me wrong, but it really, really drove me. And it affects people differently. I think some people may break. And to me though, it was a fuel, because like I was so touched by it deeply, because I think it wasn't like an average bullying. Probably it was so terrible I can't even. It brings pain when I remember, right? But that has served as such a big fuel, because it always brought me to, I'm going to show you attitude, right? I'm going to show all of you attitude, um, which now looking back, I think I don't know if that's the right thing, because although it did give me a lot of fuel and a lot of push to become a successful person, and look back and really, as it may sound like bragging, but really, I think I am more successful than any of my classmates, that I've ever studied with, right? At least at this point,
Yeah,
in my own field.
no, that makes a lot of sense.
It feels good, but I don't know if that's the right mindset now, because I think it's actually gotten me into this state where I get motivated by negative, which my coach, I've taken some life coaching, a few years back, has this notion of love, not fear,
Mhm.
where he says you have to be motivated, and all the strength has to come from love, not fear, right?
That
Um,
makes-
it has I think, at some points, it has gotten me into this field where I even become complacent when there's no adversity, right? Which I think is not really the right thing. So I'm trying to actually, get over it, and get into the state where I'm motivated more by love rather than fear, rather than hate, of because I don't have anybody bullying me right now, right? I'm at the top. right?
Mhm.
But then what is there to motivate me, right? At one point, I caught myself, right? Hey, I'm kind of making progress, but I'm not as hungry anymore. Do I need somebody like actually bullying me, or like creating competition, or stepping on my toes to do that? No. So I don't know how, but I'm trying to learn the way to still get that fuel, but without this negative side of it. If you know what I mean?
Yeah. Susan, what's your take on that? Because, like I said, you definitely talked to Patrick Swayze, you talked to some others that might be considered celebrity types, and of course, you had your own illustrious career in social work. So, what are some of those life lessons that you have learned either from the conversations or from your own experiences that you can bring to our audience, similar to what Sardar just did and everything? Because I think that a lot of times the negative can be there, and we can also learn from our mentors and those that we admire. And we know that you admire Patrick a lot. So, what is some of the things that you have learned from that space?
Well, Patrick was bullied quite a bit as a kid because he was a dancer, when he played violin, and kids would pick on him and beat him up and stuff like that. And that big Barbara Walters interview in 1988, the first interview, he talked about that, walk around with a chip on my shoulder, but how to get over that, you know. But basically, I think hard work and discipline will get you places. I think that was from him and his mom. And you fight, you don't give up. You might not always win. I mean, Patrick didn't win his battle with pancreatic cancer, but he sure fought a hell of a battle.
Yeah.
So those are really big life lessons. Patrick actually, he preferred to be on his two ranches rather than in the midst of Hollywood in LA. He did a lot of press. He did appearances, but many times he was hanging out on his ranches. He had tons of land, especially on the New Mexico ranch, where he liked to sort of commune with nature, go with his horse. Sometimes his wife came, with her horse, and they went out in the woods. Sometimes you stay there a couple of days and you try to stay centered. So I think that really, bottom line isn't always money. And it's great to be successful in your field. But bottom line is about love, your family, the people around you, I think is what I got from it. Um, Another thing that kind of strikes me is I interviewed Jacqueline Smith,
Mhm.
Charlie's Angels, for my last book. She was a student of Patsy way back when for dance. She grew up in Houston. And look at her. I mean, she, in addition to her acting and dancing and all that, she's a big entrepreneur,
Mhm.
And I think she maybe that sort of paved the ways for some of the other people in Hollywood or actors, actresses. But she's quite an example, I think. I mean, she's still um, I don't know if you've seen the Netflix TV show. Well, it's on Netflix now. It's a TV show, All American. She popped up on there the other day. I don't know if either one of you have seen that, but it's a Black Lives Matter show, and she pops up. Well, she's pretty amazing too, but she was, student of Patsy, Patrick's mother, and also sort of did a little bit of mentoring to Patrick. Of very big support to him. She's a little bit older, but I come back to the bottom line. The hard work pays off. You're not going to get anywhere in this world. I don't care what you do without it. And the discipline. When people say, "Oh, it's so much work to write a book," yes, it is, but it's also very. It can be very tedious, but it's also very rewarding. So,
Yeah, no doubt about that. This is actually from both of you and everything. One of the things that I sometimes get frustrated by, and I am guilty of it as well, and I'll admit those things that I am guilty of, is sometimes you can get caught up in other people's dreams, meaning that you are wanting to be supportive of your friends and acquaintances and some of the projects that they are working on, and you don't always necessarily put your own dreams and ambitions on the front burner. So, to both of you, how do you avoid that? Because I know that whether it is in a family environment or a business environment, a lot of times people will tell you how they idea is the greatest thing since the invention of bread, and therefore you need to jump on their bandwagon. And sometimes you don't always think about your own bandwagon and all in that space. So I'm seeing Sadar shaking his head, so I'll go to him first because he's probably dealt with that sometimes where people are willing to have you jump on whatever their bandwagon is, and sometimes it puts your train on the backtrack and all in that. And I think that that is a mistake in entrepreneurship. And I know that I've been guilty of that. And it sounds like from what I'm seeing you shake your head that you might have gone down that path a couple of times as well. So just how do you avoid that?
How do we avoid that? Like when people are like so they kind of shout their opinion to
Right.
you. You're
Yeah.
saying, right? Um, I think it. Yeah, I think like, it just acts as signs of narcissism a lot of times, where they're so like so dominant in that. And I actually started noticing, I think, as I mature more, that there's a lot more people in my life that popped up here and there. Not everybody, but like popped up here and there that actually are so assertive of their opinions when they don't unsolicited advice. Basically, they pretty much give that unsolicited advice. I just learned how to smile and nod, just like what I did right now, and say, yeah, sure, and not even argue with that. And but very much limit my next interaction with them. Right? It's very important because I used to not notice those kind of people. Some that are even in my closer inner circle that I started limiting now. So that's what I'm doing right now. I just look at those people and just say, hey, sure. I don't argue with them. I don't fight with them. I don't waste my energy on that. Just say yes, sure, absolutely. And then I just don't follow their advice if I don't think it's right. But I let them go, and I very much distance myself from those people.
Yeah.
And
So not just the unsolicited advice. Definitely that's part of where I was going, but also the ones like you've got your company or the company that you are co-owning, the Jafton company, and you might have somebody that will come around and be like, I'll just make up a name, Sampton is going to be a better company, and therefore you need to jump on the Sampton bandwagon because Jafton's only going to go but so far. So you need to jump on the Sampton bandwagon and all along those lines because we're going to be a much bigger and better product than you are, and therefore you don't need to really be dealing with your own company and all in that space. You need to come and join our company because our company is going to be bigger and better than yours. And definitely you're going down the wrong path. Sometimes they will tear down your partners or find other ways to kind of nag and do the kind of negative Willie attitude or negative nanny, I guess is the expression, and all in that space. So that's really where I was going is those folks that are
yeah,
wanting to tear down the business in order to try to draw you into their bigger
yeah.
empire, whatever they think that empire is.
Well, I think that's another again sign of a toxic behavior in which we have to learn to deal as it comes. But if it's not toxic, if they actually can sell me on a vision, hey, why don't we sell our company to them and join them? It's always so there's no there's always a offer if it's good enough. There's always a way to accept that, right? And with that said, actually, I would have to step out. I think there's another podcast I had back to back.
No, no problem. And we're getting ready to wrap up everybody very soon. One thing I get everybody to do, and so I'll start with you since you're back in out first. And everything is everybody that comes on the various shows that I do, I give them to get how they can be reached, their message of positivity, and all along those lines. There is a third question I ask about dealing with that inner and outer critic. So if you can get to that, that would be cool as well. But if you can, I'm not worried about that as much as the message of positivity and hope and how folks can reach you. And if you want to tackle the inner and outer critic, that is cool as well. And like I said, we'll probably wrap up the whole thing in about 10 or 15 minutes, but me and Susan can carry part of that conversation after you bounce. So, Sardar, if you can tell folks how you can be reached and the message about
yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, you can reach me at sardor at akhmedovs.co, my last name, and then the letter S at the end, .co, or on my Instagram, my last name, akhmedov.co. That's my Instagram. So yeah, reach out to me. Love to, connect with everybody. And thank you so much for having me on, Mark. I'm looking forward to talking to you guys again. Thank you, Susan, for your company.
Thank you.
Great
Yeah.
meeting you. Yeah.
Great to
And
meet
any
you.
message of positivity that you want to leave people as well? Because that's something I try to get all my guests to do. It is a global network. So any message of positivity and hope that you want to leave with our folks here and everything.
Hey, wherever you are in life right now, just know that there's a way around. Um, and I'm not too religious, but there's a saying in I think in every religion where God doesn't give you more adversity than you can handle.
Mhm.
Never, right? So wherever you are in life, it is always not more than you can handle. So you got this, and you can get out of it. And as long as you think positively and believe, have hope, have faith in a better future, it will happen. It will turn around.
Yeah, it sounds like a great message. Definitely going to let you
Thank you.
bounce. I hope that you'll make a return trip. I love having guests come back, whether it's on this or our new show or a number of the other shows on Pod TV. So hopefully you can make a return trip and we can further delve into some of the story. But I was glad to have you on this conversation and look forward to you coming back at another time and have success on the other podcast. Because I'm not one of those folks that is going to be concerned about people being on various podcasts because it's all about getting the message out, whether it's on our podcast or
Absolutely.
others.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah. Take
No
care.
problem. Take
Take
it easy.
care.
Bye. Bye.
Hey, Susan, and like I said, we're going about another 10, 15 minutes, and then I've got to wrap up, and I know you've got other stuff going on as
Mhm.
well. But one thing that I was curious about, and I was kind of alluding to it with Sardar, is this notion of the inner critic and the outer critic. I'm sure that when you first decided to write this book, and you've definitely been in the social work field, some of your own family members were probably going like, you can't write a book. You've never written a book a day in your life and everything. And I know that there were probably even times that you had your own arguments with yourself because I know that I have literally talked myself out of jobs that I probably was qualified for. And I will, because it's not unpublic knowledge. I've talked about it in this show and other shows as well. I am still, unfortunately or fortunately, in that single lane. And I know that there have been young ladies and now middle aged ladies that I have talked myself out of even approaching them because of having that whole conversation. And by the time you talk yourself into it, then they've already gone on to the next gentleman or gone into the next part of their life and everything. So, how have you dealt with both the inner and the outer critics? And I'm sure, like I said, there have been people in your family circle that have told you reasons that you shouldn't do it, whether it was your own direct family, whether that's husband, kids, or whatever, and even parents, and all along those lines. And I'm sure there were folks that you times that you've had that conversation in our head. We all have that conversation in our head where we can defeat ourselves. So, how have you dealt with both of those?
Oh, well, that's a great question. Yes, I can be a very big inner critic in my head.
Mhm.
So, fortunately, um, I learned how to deal with that. Usually, the critical parent inside your head, and you learn how to navigate that. Um, family and stuff, they've been mostly really supportive. Although I did have somebody say, "Okay, that's it. Don't write any more books. You never make any money on them. That's it." I said, "No, I'm not quitting because that's my passion." The other thing that has happened is people have ideas what I should put in my book,
Mhm.
what they want, not what I want. So sometimes it's a very delicate line to cross because these are people who um, either I've, you know, interviewed or become friends with. Um, I don't want to offend them, but yet these are my books. I don't want to write about certain topics. I don't want to write about gossip, you know, expose this and that. No, that's not why I write my books. So uh, there's a way to do it and a way to do it.
Yeah.
I've been fortunate to have a lot of outer support for my books, and I know who's in my circle. If I can't get out of my inner critic, then I go to somebody I know in my outer circle who's going to be supportive for a minute.
Yeah, that makes a
So
lot of sense and everything. I can definitely see that. And all you mentioned the books, and I know sure that a lot of the books are Dirty Dancing and Patrick Swayze motivated and all in that way. Is there another book or book idea that you've got that is either another star of that particular movie? Because I do know there was the female lead, and then there were the number of other characters that were in that movie? Or are you thinking about some other celebrities that you have an admiration for that you are hoping to write about, or what is on Susan's bucket list, wish list for books that she wants to write?
Well, I'm actually on my fifth book right now, writing it, and um, it's a different kind of book about Patrick.
Okay.
I'm collecting stories and memories of people who work with him, grew up with him, in their words, and sort of tying it together with some of the interviews he did and quotes and stuff. So, there's a lot of challenges in doing something like that, because the big celebrities are like, well, who else is in the book? Who's your publisher? Well, I'm working on getting an agent. I've never tried to get an agent before to get a traditional publisher, but now it's seeming to the book is really seeming to come along. After that book, which this is not going to come out for a couple of years, probably maybe a year and a half, 2 years. After that, I think it was just switching gears totally. And now I don't have any connections to any other celebrity, so like what I have to Patrick
No,
and
that makes
his
a lot of sense. But
family. Uh,
I said that makes a lot of sense. I was actually just thinking about another super fan that I knew and all in that space, but they were a super fan of Michael Jackson, and I can go ahead
uh,
and say their name and everything. But it was a young woman, and I think she's still active. Matter of fact, I know she's still active on Instagram and other places by the name of Gadget Trish. I think it's Gadget Trish or Gadget Tish. It's one of those two
mhm,
names and everything. But she was such a super fan of Michael Jackson and the Jackson family that I work at a cultural arts center. I'll actually be going there in a couple of hours here in Durham, that we brought in Rebe Jackson, and this particular lady at that time was living in New York City. So I want to say she caught the bus down. I don't think she drove down, but she caught the bus down just to catch Rebe perform Centipede and to
yeah,
meet and chat with Rebe, because that's how much of a super fan that she was. And this was it was definitely long before the pandemic. It might have been 10 to 15 years ago, but I just remember her coming down and just saying how much she was that type of super fan. So I was just wondering, how far have you gone to see Patrick or some of Patrick's folks and everything, and how far are you willing to travel to do that? Because I was, like I said, we were shocked when this lady came down. It was like, yeah, I'm down here, because it was not a well attended event, because like you said, it was some promotional things that probably could have been done better, but they were definitely getting their dance groove on. It definitely enjoyed it and all in that space. And I know another time when they were living, Ruby and Ossie came, and I think Ruby was doing her One Good Nerve play, or my One Good Nerve, and actually Ozzy came and surprised Ruby because the play was being done during their anniversary, and that was sponsored by a fraternity. It might even be the same fraternity that um, Kamala Harris is part of. I can't remember whether it was the AK or the Deltas that sponsored that particular event, but it's the fraternity that I know that Ruby is part of, and that's what I can't remember which one it was. And that actually was well attended. That had a good crowd and everything. But I know that sometimes super fans will go out of their way to come to events. So I was just wondering, what's the furthest out of your way you have gone to attend something?
yeah. And I just want to say too, as the years went on, the attraction to me to Patrick was not just his dancing and acting and all that. I think I said this before. It was his spirituality, his integrity, his strength of character, stuff like that. So, and just being a down to earth good guy.
Yeah.
So, but that took a while as years went on. But I did go to California.
Mm,
Although you see, when my dad was still living, he lived in California, so
right.
just sort of perfect because I stopped, in the LA area, stayed there first, and I went to see Patrick Starr in the Hollywood Walk of Fame like three times. Okay, twice was after he had passed. I left flowers, and it was sort of, uh, a way to deal with him passing. And also, I visited the Wax Museum, which I hate wax museums,
Mhm.
but they have a really good statue of him. It's pretty cool. So for that, it was worth it. But you wouldn't catch me going in another wax museum for anyone else.
Say no,
So
no trips to wax museums for Susan. She's not going to the wax museums.
now they're sort of eerie. Um, but it was another way to deal with him passing because I mean he died when he was 57. That was pretty young in today's world. And pancreatic cancer is just a horrible illness. My grandmother died from it. I do donate a little bit from the first three books to the Stanford Cancer Institute.
Mhm.
They have a special fund set up in honor or memory of Patrick to do pancreatic cancer treatment research. So um, I don't know. I was trying to think where else. I mean, I went to Nashville and Houston, but that's not all that far from Detroit, you know.
Not that
I
far.
don't, huh?
It's not that far at all. It's a little bit of a drive, but or a plane ride, but it's definitely California. It would be further. As you were talking, I was actually just remembering the first celebrity death that I can remember because I was very young when King and Malcolm died. So I'm sure that there might be some memories buried in my memory banks and everything. But the first one that I remember, literally, I think was 19. It was in the late 70s or the early 80s. I got to remember when Elvis passed, but it was when Elvis passed because my grandmother was living. That's why I'm thinking it might have been 79 or 80 and all in that space. But when he passed, well, I was going with my grandma down to Disney World down there in Florida and everything. And I remember us going on the rides, and grandma was not going to go on certain rides because they looked a little bit dangerous. And at that time, she was probably close to the age that I am now. She might have been a little bit older, but she was like, I'm not jumping on that ride. Y'all can't pay me enough to get on that ride and everything. And I remember when we came back to the hotel, turning on the TV, and that's when we learned of Elvis's having passed after having enjoyed all that time in Disney and all along those lines because it was literally all over the TV news at that particular time. So I think that might have been the first celebrity death that I remember because literally you turn on the TV and Walter Cronkite or whoever was the anchor at that time was sharing the story and they were still trying to figure out whether it was intentional or accidental or what was going on before the full story came out around Elvis's death. But I do remember that and everything. So I think that might have been the first celebrity one that I can recall.
Hmm. And I'm big into like crystals and stuff. And this is Patrick's crystal, okay?
Okay.
His sister-in-law sent it to me. I had sent him some crystals, me and everyone else, right? When he got diagnosed and stuff, and she wanted to send them back, and I said, "You don't have to send them back. You know, that's not why I sent them." So she ended up sending me this one, which is fairly big, and a smaller one, which I thought was pretty cool.
Definitely. We were doing the show. It's actually one with Rick Rosner that used to be a Jimmy Kimmel writer, and it is two folks that are debating back and forth on the left and the right of politics, while Lance, who is the artist, is painting Jimmy, who is the Jimmy Kimmel writer, and he's semi-nude, which is why they call it Naked at Night and all in that space. But I, during that show, in the recordings, which will air later, admitted that I sometimes have a crush on some of the TV crime actresses. So they're playing actresses, folks like Emily Proctor and Shalita Grant and Vanessa Ferletto and all along those lines. So I definitely admitted it on that particular show. So I don't think it is unhidden knowledge. So I was just wondering, did you have a crush on Patrick? And if you had the crush and you had carried through on it, what would you and Patrick's life been like if you
Oh
had had
no,
your fantasy and all in that space? So did you have the crush on him when you were a schoolgirl, or is it a crush that ever left, or was it more about the acting?
no, no, no. Patrick and I are same age. Okay, we were born a couple months apart. So the first time I heard of Patrick Swayze was when he was in North and South. So I'm
Okay.
already old by then. And but it didn't really resonate with me, to be honest. I probably shouldn't say that. I didn't watch the whole thing through. I don't know if you saw it, the miniseries. It was like in '85.
Mm-hmm.
Dirty Dancing was '87. So I never. Yeah, I mean, he was very attractive physically, but he's also very attractive emotionally. He married young, um, and was married until he died to the same woman. So you know, there was no unreality that I
Right.
was dealing with and what I was going to do, but I wanted to support him and be part of his support system, especially near the end. I was one of the ones who moderated the official fan club's website. We had a place where people could, what do you call it, write in and I had to monitor some of the comments and stuff. And
Oh, like a memorial page, because I know there were some of those during the pandemic and everything. So like a memorial page where they could write their
yeah, but I mean,
comments
it
and
was before he passed, and they were writing in suggestions what he should do for treatment and this,
right.
that, and the other. And but once in a while, you got an odd, weird comment. But so I don't know if I answered your question, but
No, you did it to some degree
he's
and everything, but definitely I was just thinking about that whole nature, and that is actually a rarity in Hollywood. So I'm sure that that might even be a book in and of itself because we've
well,
always time here about how there are so many non-successful weddings, and even some of the successful weddings that have ended after long histories. Because I know a lot of people were very much aware of Quincy Jones, and I think it's Peggy Lipton that was one of those TV
oh,
actors as well, and they were married for several years, but just I think recently got divorced. But then there are folks like Denzel, and I think his wife are still together, and some others that are in that space of having long marriages, but that doesn't seem to be the norm in Hollywood.
yeah,
So that could be a book in and of itself. The successful marriage between Patrick and I think you said her name was Lisa.
yeah, and just because they're married so long, not just them, but anybody in general, Hollywood or non-Hollywood, doesn't mean there were a lot of rough times, and it was all, you know, I don't know what the words are, pretty.
He wasn't always milk and honey. Sometimes they had their rough patches as well.
Oh yeah, that's all I can say about that.
Yeah, that makes sense, and we all have those rough patches, including those that were, like you said, some of those that have been married for a long time. I want to say that whichever one passed first, Ruby and Ossie were married for a very long time, and then one passed shortly after the other passed. So I think they're both gone now. But like I said, we were just glad when he came and literally surprised his wife because that show was going on at the center at that time. She was doing, I think, a 3 or 4 day run, and he literally just kind of kept us to our silence. So we learned about it after the fact, and then he surprised her by literally popping up and presented her roses, and they guess they
Oh,
went off to everything. But it was something because he was a busy actor, just like she was a busy actress. So I don't think she was expecting him to pop into Durham, North Carolina, while she was doing a one woman play during their anniversary. But it was definitely a very touching moment that I definitely have great memories of.
that's sweet. Yeah, I will say also that I have a lot of friends still from the fan club or people who knew Patrick or friends with Patrick. I have a writer, producer, director out in Austria. He's from New York, but he directed Patrick in his second to last movie. Came all the way from Austria here to the Detroit area. We had like a um, at the Jewish Film Festival. We showed Patrick's movie Jump, which most people haven't seen, but pre-Nazi stuff based on a true story. Patrick won Best International Actor for that. So Joshua Sinclair came all the way from Austria for that. Turned out to be a keynote speaker at the Jewish Film Festival. He showed the festival. It was very well received. That was way back in 2010. But I have connections to a lot of people now, and I credit Patrick for a lot of that, and feel very fortunate. I got people all over the place. Nobody's in Michigan, right?
Sounds like it. Sounds like an amazing connection, and he's definitely helped you make some amazing connections that you are keeping even to this day and all along those lines. So, like I said, we're going to wrap up and all along those lines. I definitely hope that you come back again. Maybe we can share some more around the
Oh,
social
that'd
media
be
aspect as well
fantastic.
as Patrick
Thank
and some of
you.
the other things. But we touched on a lot of different things, and I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I hope you did as
Yeah.
well. But as I told the other gentlemen, Santar and everything, one of the things I always do on pretty much all my shows is give people a chance to tell how they can be reached and contacted, and also any message of positivity or hope that they want to share with our global audience. So I'll give you that same opportunity that I gave him. Then we'll go out with that same little robot thing that brought us in and everything. So definitely any
Okay.
messages that you would like to share in that space.
I appreciate that. I have a website. It's like dirtydancing.com. Um, it has a lot of stuff about Patrick, of course, and Dirty Dancing and my 4 books. If anyone wants to get a free chapter from the Patrick Swayze The Dreamer book, just go on the site and click on the button. There's also a contact form for me. If there's any questions, my books are available on Amazon and many other sites and my website.
Before you
So,
get to the message of positivity and hope, I think that in the email that I got from you, that you did say that if somebody is watching now or if they're watching in the reruns, which will air during this week, but if somebody, and the first person, because we're not going to give it to everybody, but the first person to send a request via your website, click on contact and request the free book so they can get the free book. And this
yes,
is the first person to send a request. So, like I said, we're not giving it to all 1,000 or however many people eventually watch this show and everything. But the first person that does that and lets us know that you have watched on this day on July 31st, they can get a free copy. So we're not trying to
yes,
give.
I'll let them choose which book they want. Probably out of the last three.
Okay.
The first one's it's okay, but yeah, that would be great. But like for anybody who goes on the website and you want to get a free chapter from that Patrick book, Patrick Swayze, The Dreamer, all you have to do is click. So that's available also. Thank you for reminding me of that. I forgot
No
about the
problem.
free
I
book.
definitely remember that.
It's been
Definitely
a
want to make
minute,
sure.
so
Yeah. And now the message of positivity and hope. And then, like I said, we'll get out of here with this robot and let you
okay.
get back to the rest of your day there in Michigan.
Well, I think that each of us can make a positive difference in the world. Patsy and Patrick certainly did. They were, Patrick was a superstar and his mom was pretty well known, but each of us can make a contribution to make the world a better place.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And on that note, we're going to go out with the same robot that we got in on. And like I told Sandar, the same goes for you, Susan. I hope that you'll make a return trip, whether it's on this radio show with Mark Lee, whether it's on Pod TV, or whether it's on my other one on Wednesdays. That's the online dinner party, or one of our news shows, or some of the other things that we have on a regular basis. So I do hope that you will make a return trip in the not too distant future and all of that. And I hope you have a great Monday, and then hopefully we get into some cooler weather. I don't know that we're going to see that in August because we know August is just as bad as July when it comes to
Mhm.
dog days. But at least September is around the corner, and October is even around the corner as well. And we do know that historically September and October are at least a little on the cooler side. So hopefully
Mhm.
we can get ourselves through this hot weather and get into some cooler space. I know I, for one, am rooting for that, but hopefully you are as well. And we're getting
Yeah.
ready to get on out of here, and we'll catch you on the flip side. So definitely looking forward to seeing you back on another show in the not too distant future.
Thank you, Mark. I really enjoyed this and I really appreciate that.
No
Have a
problem at
great,
all.
great rest of the day.
You do the same.
Okay. Bye bye.